One of the things we've observed is that the world that we live in is a world of uncertainty. Have you noticed that, how uncertain our world is? One day you can be sitting at home, getting up and going to work, and the next day the news can tell you that there is a terrible epidemic that has plagued the United States and the world, and your whole life is turned upside down. What relationship do pestilences like this have to Bible prophecy? Or you can be turning on the news, whether it's CNN or Fox News or MSNBC or ABC. You turn on the news one day and you see that Russia has 130,000 troops bordered on the Ukraine, and there's a war in the Ukraine, and there's a threat of further disaster as more nations become involved. Or you look at the crime in our city streets, in the major cities of America, whether it's Los Angeles, Chicago, Detroit, Indianapolis, New York City, are riddled with crime today. Why is there so much crime and violence in our society? What's behind the natural disasters? You can have a retirement home, and you just plan to retire, and immediately thereafter, tornado wipes away whole communities. Does the Bible say anything about the wars, the rumors of wars, the pestilences in our society? Does it say anything about the rising crime and violence that we see? Does it say anything about the natural disasters? Jesus talked about over 29 different signs that would be present in the world just before his return. Now, many of these signs have been present down through the centuries, but very few of them have been present throughout the history of our world. Does the Bible say anything about the possibility of world disaster? We're going to talk about that, but most of all, we're going to be talking about hope. Now, we're going to deal with a prophecy, probably the most significant prophecy in the book of Daniel that leads you to understand Revelation. And let me tell you a little story about this prophecy. I was speaking in Moscow in Russia, and I was speaking in the first in Plana University, then I spoke in the Kremlin. 13,000 people came out every night, and then we spoke in the Olympic Stadium. Well, when I got there, they assigned me a bodyguard, and I said, I don't need a bodyguard, but they said, I got many angels. They said, no, you don't know, Pastor, you need a bodyguard. So I got really acquainted with my bodyguard. His name was Boris, a good Russian name. And so I said to Boris, have you always been a Christian? He kind of smiled, said, no, I was an atheist. I said, what was your goal in life? He said, my goal in life was to join the KGB. He said, my uncle was the guard of Stalin. And he said, so I took KGB training school. It's very hard to get in. He said, I took classes on psychological manipulation. I took classes on explosives, and I took classes on judo and martial arts and languages. I was going to go to Italy as a spy. But he said, one night I was up on a watchtower, and it rained and it got wet, and I slipped, fell off, broke my back. And I was in the hospital. I began to think, is this the meaning of life? Is this purpose for life? And he said, I knew of one thing about Christianity. He said, I thought there was some sermon by this guy named Jesus who preached a mountain sermon. So he said, I wrote a letter to the Orthodox priest to get more information about the sermon on Jesus, about Jesus that made on this mountain sermon. And he said it got mixed up, and it went to somebody else's mailbox, a Christian pastor who understood prophecy. He came to my bed, unfolded the prophecies of Daniel, and he said, I stood back and I said, how could this be true? He talked about the great empires of Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece, Rome. He talked about Europe's divided state. And he said he showed me history and prophecy.